Data is loud, but the right patterns whisper first. Today I'm joined by Elisabeth Vealey, a CFO who runs into the fire when good companies start slipping. Today we're doing a duet in Diagnostics. Her finance X-ray meets my operations MRI. We'll follow the money and we'll walk the halls and translate non-delivery into solvable system gaps, not scapegoats. Board pressure, leadership fatigue, post-merger chaos. We'll show you when to call for outside help, what to ask for, and how to rebuild trust fast. Leadership today isn't just about scaling. It's about navigating constant uncertainty, market disruptions, and high-pressure decisions. If you're dealing with chaos, bottlenecks, and relentless pressure, welcome to the Business Emergency Room. Hey, thanks for tuning in. I'm glad you're here. We are going to talk about one of my all-time favorite subjects with one of my all-time favorite people to talk to that about. We're going to talk about diagnostics in its widest form. I'm here with Elisabeth Vealey. She has over 2 decades background in finance world, in accounting in all its widest aspects, and of course, CFO positions. So anything from the finance angle. The lovely thing about it, though, is that Elisabeth and I get along so well because she's curious about everything beyond the finance too. She's also on the board of the National Cooperative Bank, and these days focuses on aiding businesses in their turnarounds and exits. So similar clientele as I look after, and that's why she's here. So we're going to do a bit of a duo act today, looking at things from both the finance and the engineering angle or operations angle. I'm so glad you're here, Elisabeth. Welcome.
Thank you, Maartje. Love to be here.
Yeah. Well, I love you're here, that you're here. We can make a lot of bad jokes about or argue about the finance angle versus the tech angle or the operations angle. And of course, Elisabeth will always argue that it's all about the money. In the world, most people argue that it's all about the money. I would at least give you that it's mostly about the money, or most often about the money. I'd say there's maybe more. So if we look at diagnostics or looking at businesses where things are not amazing, right? Why would you argue that the numbers, or how do you argue that the numbers and the books are such a good place to start to actually do diagnostics on what's ailing a business?
Sure. Well, I think with the right set of eyes, and if someone can come in with background in different industries, it's pretty amazing what can surface, I guess. So when I come into a company, I'm following the cash. I'm following the cash in and the cash out. And I'm seeing why the cash is not coming in faster and why it's not going out slower. So once you dive into that deep of a analysis, I guess, of the money, things just happen, right? Like you start walking down the hallway and you find the different closets with the skeletons in them, and you spend time with the different members of the staff on inefficiencies, and that's why I work so closely, with people like you, Maartje, about in the operations side, because the numbers will tell the story, right? Like the CFO, if they're doing their job, a lot of people call accountants historians, but I don't think that's quite true. Like if you have the right person in the seat, they can also like predict that there's a trend starting to go in the wrong way, right? Like we've talked about, like I have an alarm system, you have a spider sense where something's off, something is starting to get off the rails, we needed to get back on. And, the last 7 years, I have been brought into, unfortunately, turnaround situations. So these are not startups. These are companies that were doing really well for a long time, and then something shifted, whether it was rapid growth that they couldn't handle, or botched systems conversions, or the pandemic, you name it, maybe incredible turnover on the leadership team. And a really good company is starting to fail. And so that's the space I've been in the last 7 years, which has been fun, right? It's like the firemen running into the fire while everyone's running out. So that's what I've been doing, because I find it a lot more interesting than kind of the day to day. And, I've learned it's kind of a system. I didn't mean to build a system, but I did, and I call it the Sophius Method. But it's just because when I come in, I have like a methodology that I kind of follow, but it is literally chasing the cash and then having access to the different parts of the organization so that you can interview, the rest of the teams. But, sometimes when you've been running a company for a long, long time, you can get into a rut and what you did has worked for many years, maybe decades, and now you've hit a wall or you've plateaued or something hit that you weren't ready for. And it's just time. I think a good leader knows when it's time to bring in some outside help. You're not giving over the reins. You're not changing anything. It's not saying you failed. It's just simply you're actually very intelligent and you realize that maybe some of the skill sets that got you where you are not the same that's going to get you to the next level. You're not going anywhere, right? But I think it's
Yeah.
time to bring in some fresh eyes and take a look.
Yeah, and for me, in this current day and age, everybody's talking about data, right? And more, and we're gathering more, and we have more of it. But the finance function is the one that's typically been the one that's for the longest and in the most consistent way been gathering the data. So yeah, the historian or the there is at least a trail, and so it's much easier to see what looks unusual or what's changing and what's moving when you have a clearer history and you have a longer history, right? And you can see those ups and downs, and and we're not anywhere else in business typically that consistent with what numbers we track and how we track them and where we have them. And not even in this day and age where we can have more of it. That's all relatively new, right? So a lot of businesses don't have that systemic measurement going on for enough period of time. So yeah, I give you totally that the finance is a great place to start. I also love that you say, right, it goes beyond, you start wondering the holes. You need somebody like you who is willing to not just look at the books and then say, okay, this is what the numbers say. Now I want to find somebody who can talk to me saying, okay, I see the numbers do this. Now I want to speak to somebody who can tell me what might be a reasonable explanation for that, and does that hold logic, right? So yeah, and let me go back a little bit though to the start though, because what are the reasons then that people bring you in? Because both of us believe in the fresh perspective, right? In somebody coming in and having a look at how a business is running, and you are describing that your clients are seeing unexpected results or are facing turmoil. You and I also both know that many of us, including us in our personal lives, if we face the same situation, often wait quite long before asking for help, right? So what triggers that people do invite you in to come and bring a fresh pair of eyes to the situation, typically?
I would say my favorite is when it's the CEO brings me in and is just ready to be open to feedback, ready to just come in and turn things, upside down, have strategy sessions, with their team. Often, CEOs try to run the strategy sessions themselves. And I think it's very powerful to bring in a third objective party to run the strategy sessions. And I've had great success in that area for both parties. Not only the rest of the leadership team gets to kind of, relax a little bit and take ownership of their areas, but the CEO gets to sit back a little bit and get a different perspective from having a third party help on the strategy piece. So that's my favorite. I also have been brought in by board of directors where things are starting to go really bad, right? And the current leadership doesn't have the answer. And so I'll be brought in to do that, to work with the CEO, the current CFO, and again, fresh set of eyes, see what they've been working on, to give them some fresh perspectives on what I've seen, some best practices, and just kind of, chase the cash. Now, that being said, sometimes it does result in turnover, right? Because it may be somebody on the team that is holding back the company because they're not adjusting, they're not shifting, they're not, I guess, increasing their skill set in some area. And then, a strange one that I've had a couple times now is a company tries to hire a permanent CFO, and they refuse to accept the job until I come in and do diagnostics. So that's been interesting because I'm not trying to come in and be your company's CFO. So there's no threat to anyone involved. And then I'll go in and do my diagnostics and my report, and then either work with the CFO they hire, or, come in and turn it around, maybe for 6 to 9 months, and then the new CFO, comes in. I've also had executive directors of nonprofits do the same thing, where they were being recruited by a large nonprofit. They had some iffy financials, and then they ask someone like me to come in before they'll accept the job, to just give them some comfort that that things are workable, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm
So
not
that's
coming in
more the
pretending
due
everything's
diligence
pretty.
space.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I would say in a different way, though. Like, I see a lot of due diligence reports, especially, or like quality of earnings reports for M&A work, right? You and I talk a lot about mergers and acquisitions and companies getting ready for exit. That's way more harsh. I would say, because I know there's a fire. I'm running into the fire. Like, I don't expect anything to be pretty. I want to see the weird Excel spreadsheets that they're trying to, run this division on. And I want to, see this unusual relationship with this vendor, where it is, because, maybe it worked for a while, and now it's not. So, it's kind of an interesting, because right now, let's face it, with AI, you can throw in some financials and AI, and they're going to give you a really beautiful, you know, financial analysis for due diligence. And so those days are almost gone, where you're just looking at numbers. If you bring the people into it, and the procedures and the inefficiencies in, then you're just running numbers. So I would say a big part of my world is to try to find the inefficiencies. And that's when I start working with all the areas, the sales team, the engineering team, the product development team. It doesn't really matter. It's just what is slowing down sales, right? And getting cash in, and what is like bleeding us dry, cash wise.
Yeah. So let's unpack that a little bit, because I hear two major elements in there that I see all the time. I first want to go back to your example of a CFO coming in and then saying, I'm not accepting the job till you have been in, right? So, and yeah, we've all been sold positions and sold roles before, and I do think typically when businesses are in hot water, there is difficult people dynamics there, right? And that's one of my favorite subjects, and also I'd say one of the major areas to work on when there is turmoil. And so if there's really entrenched positions, and when there is no openness for feedback, and when maybe the previous CFO left under circumstances that were also in the relational atmosphere, and you're being brought on, then you might want to know, right? Can you openly speak about something? So asking somebody like you to come in and actually figuring out if the organization is open to yeah, opening the echo chamber, and perceptive to feedback. And then that brings me to the second point, which is around the way the feedback goes, right? You bring it in by means of saying, well, it's efficiencies, it's fixes, and it's not a blame game, because the reality of the current world is that what worked yesterday doesn't work today. One, two, you might also be in a situation because there was 100 little things, and it's an apple cart, or it's the Swiss cheese with the holes in it, right? That suddenly line up. Unfortunately, in life, we cannot control the timing of everything. So you might just have been unlucky with too much little buildup, and then already too much going on in your organization, and the apple cart tilting over because of something externally, or even something small internally, before you had a chance to fix some other things and take some apples off, right? And so
Totally agree.
if you assume it's going to be a blame game, and that's the challenge a bit, I think. I don't know if you experience that with sometimes when you get brought in by the board or by the investors, right? Because sometimes at that point, the assumption is that it's about the blame game and about finding a culprit. So can you talk to me a little bit about how, in your experience, you work those relationship and those conversations as part of the work you do, and who all needs to be at the table to what extent in these situations?
Sure, absolutely. It's funny. At my last client, I was called I think they called me the accountant's therapist or something, because it's exactly what you said. Like, everybody that was in the seat was doing their best. It's not like anyone was phoning it in, but they were overworked. They had a system conversion that didn't get completed, as I'm sure we all know. You do any sort of system conversion, whether it's payroll or accounting or any of them, the odds of it going well, please, and then everyone underestimates the time frame and the amount of work and the amount of effort. And then there's always modules that don't get implemented because you just run out of time, right? Because you're running a business, right? Like, and so it gets put on the shelf. So when I'm coming in from a perspective that, right? Like, I don't think anyone's doing anything unethical or anyone is not giving their all. I think either they've grown into that role and maybe they never had any formal training and they're doing a hell of a job like that, but maybe just, wrapping it around with a little formal training is all they need, right? Many clients I've been in the $5 to $20 million space have grown their accounting team organically, right? It was someone that just started in the ranks and they may not even have an accounting background or a finance background, but they love the company. They're passionate. They work hard, and that's how they got the role. And they're a little nervous that they're going to look like they're failing or they're going to look like they're not the right person. I do not approach it like that. I grew up in a small business environment. My parents owned a small business. And I know what it's like where you just can't get to everything. You just can't. And so I'm not going to like swoop in like, this accounting judge slash fairy and be slamming my fist. It's so the opposite. It's more like, listen, I know what you've been through. So don't hide anything. Let's just show me the projects that you had to shelf because you couldn't get to it that maybe would make all this, go away. So I think it's open communication. I think it's the style of the accountant. Um, and I got to be careful between accountant and CFO, and I'm careful with like all of that stuff. You really have to have that right dynamic. But I've seen it a lot right now. I've seen some crazy stuff right now, and but the reality is, I think I'm 7 for 7 turning around companies that were failing because of this open approach. Like, they know what they're doing. Just something's shifted. Something has shifted, and the team maybe has been together so long that they can't sort it out together. Maybe they're handling it like a family instead of a true business, and they just need someone to come in and kind of without any emotion and judgment sort it out. Now that being said, I do need the leader. So even though I have like a nice kind of pedigree, if you looked at my background, I'm actually very scrappy. I don't really mince words. So I do want to be that challenger to the leader. There's times I'll close a door and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, that meeting was terrible. Like, why did you say that? Like, because I've learned, Maartje, the top leaders, they don't often get performance reviews anymore, right? Or the board is overseeing it, but they do the best they can. They're not there every day. And some of these leaders don't even think the human resource director really applies to them. And so they lose that benefit of getting candid, open, professional, respectful, feedback to grow so that they can keep growing. Like, who are they going to talk to, right? It's the saying, it's lonely on the top. It's really true, right? Because then you meet with your peers outside of your business and you're always a little guarded. Like, it's hard to do that. So you need someone on the inside that I think for like someone like you and I, where we're not trying to get a job, we're not trying to come in and work for you or take someone's job. But we've seen your company now. I've seen your skeletons in your closet, and let me kind of push you. I want to push you a little.
But you and I were talking this the other day because I actually get quite a lot of my work through the board or the investor side. And I have the difficult conversations need having, right? Not out in the open in the public necessarily. They need to happen because one of the first questions I ask if I get brought in by an investor or the board is saying, okay, before this is a difficult situation for your C-suite, right? So is the confidence still there, or is it actually done? I've done way too many target seek improvement projects where the decision is already made. I said, because if the decision already is made, that the trust is no longer there in a certain individual, let's start there. Because then there is no sense in moving around that subject with that person still there, trying to keep going. If the trust is still there, and I also truly believe that there is there's at least one more good chance and a solid chance, and I truly feel that from the people involved, then the next stage is to have some difficult conversations, right? But then I also very much tend to side with the C-suite because they're running the business, and I see very much what you brought up earlier around the feedback, that they're also in that position and the board's now ringing the bell, and they saw things. They saw things, but they didn't say things, right? So there is still a lot of boards out there who could do better in terms of supporting their C-suite, on bringing their own experience to the table. They see the numbers, they see the reports. If they're in those positions, they should be able to identify some of the first symptoms of things not moving in the right direction. And if they've been accepting answers that didn't sound full or complete, or decided to just watch it unfold, that's not necessarily fair to a C-suite either, right? And so I tend to then really side more with the C-suite who's been in the trenches and say, okay, you also need to ask for more from your board and your investors going forward. And you need to ask for more clarity on what it is then that they want, or how they want to change that collaboration going forward. Because if you're telling me that you want to give these people another chance, or two or three, or the confidence is not gone, there is typically still some trust erosion, right? And some relationship rebuilding that needs to happen. And there is no sense in trying to recoup anything or get to a better space if there is still even a little bit of a blame game going on. And so if that means that people need to first let off some steam and some frustration before you can rebuild, so to avoid that, okay, well, then let's have that messiness too, right?
Well, I totally agree with you. And you and I talked a little bit about this, where before I do a strategy session or I go in to do my analysis, I meet with all the key players, the obvious key players, and then the not so obvious key players, just those informal leaders. And then just some random, it could be like a shipping agent. It could be the person that's at the door. It doesn't really matter. And that is a space for them to vent, right? Like you said, there's probably been things that they've brought up for quite a while that has not been changed, and they're frustrated. But if they bring that to the strategy session, it's going to be unproductive, right? So I totally agree with you, where like you become the safe sounding board for just get that all out, and then you take the emotion out of it, right? And you get it back to business. Let's all get back to business here, right? And what can we change in the business? And it's funny, you use the word trust, and I went into one company and everyone was talking about it, they're not trusting each other, not trusting each other. And I couldn't grasp that at first. I'm like, the word trust for me in a business setting was odd at first. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, you don't trust that they're not going to like kill you, or like, what don't you trust? And it was really just that somebody was not performing the duties that they had committed to doing, right? They were not fulfilling their responsibilities. And so again, taking the emotion out of it, like you got to start figuring out who didn't deliver, right? Somebody needed something over and over and over again. It didn't get delivered. Why? And how can we, make that work with taking the emotions out of it? But I'm with you because, and the board, oh my gosh, thank you for bringing up the board.
Yeah. So on the not delivering part, that's tricky too, right? Because I work in the multicultural space or the international space. And I had a case where somebody was coming from one of the major multinationals and was sitting at headquarters in the US and was asking for certain, these were finance reports and logistics reports in a certain format. And he was asking them using jargon that was from the multinational he used to be attached to. And he was asking somebody whose his primary language was not English, who also had no corporate experience, right? So they came out of the small business world. And so they had their own accounting spreadsheets and reports, and the system was set up for the tiniest of operations and suddenly had to do this. So the system wasn't, there was no consultant brought back in to re-gear that finance reporting system.
Right.
So first of all, he didn't understand what he was asked for. Second of all, by the time we'd made that disconnect and made that translation, and I had the conversation with that person in their native language, it also became totally apparent that there was no way that without thousands of man hours for which there was no people, that report could be generated in the format that it was asked for, right? So non-delivery is not even necessarily a sign of unwillingness of non-performance, right? It could be totally a lost in translation situation, even if
They were
both
set
people
up
do
to
speak
fail.
English. Yeah.
Yeah. That person was set up to fail. Totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. And those are the things that slip by, right? Like that maybe no one's paying attention to. So I think that's a great example.
We can talk forever. We are definitely going to come back for another episode talking specifically also about exits, because that's a whole different subject we can put up about. You and I, Elisabeth, also are available as a duo act, right? So talk to me a little bit before we close off. Where and how do you feel it makes sense for people to maybe need more than one of us to get the job done?
Coming in as a team is so powerful. Those are my best. That's the best work I do, I think. And it's just dividing and conquering, right? And you're going to speak a different language than I am to the engineers, and both can be refreshing, right? But also, I may have the lingo that's going to make the finance and HR and IT department, relax into it, and you're going to have the lingo on the operational side. But when we bring the two together, where we do not have the long-term history in the company, we don't have any drama, we don't have any objective other than to help this company improve and get to its potential, magic just happens, right? So you've got the technical pieces on all sides. So I think bringing in a team that it works well together, and it's so we don't duplicate efforts, right? Like you're asking some questions, I'm asking some questions, and then we're at a whiteboard brainstorm. The power of having two senior level consultants whiteboarding, on the side, your company and how it's going is unbelievable. I mean, that's what the ultra wealthy have, right? My ultra wealthy clients have a whole team of people that sit at a table and analyze their estate planning and their exit planning for their company. And, you add up the hourly rate of that room. That's, amazing, right? It's very similar to the company. Bring in a team of specialists that know the engineering side, know the finance side. You're not teaching us how to do that. We're just trying to learn it in your company, right? So I think the power of bringing in a team is just priceless.
Yeah, and you need you need good compatibility in styles so that need to trust that the duo will deliver. I would also say speed can be a major factor, right? We see some of these situations where things are dire. So if your business is larger or more complex, and there is deadlines involved, trying to make things happen, the two of us together can work faster than one of us alone. It's two sets of ears, two sets of eyes. It's a quicker tackling of the problem, and it's double the set of experience to tap into, right? If people want to know more about you specifically, Elisabeth, about your experience, about working with you, about finding out more about what you do or what you can do for them, where do they go? What do they do?
Yeah, well, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, under Elisabeth Vealey, or you can go to my website at sophiusllc.com.
So all of that will also be in the show notes. So wherever you're listening to this podcast, we will make sure that the links are available. If you're currently driving, it's Elisabeth with an S, and it's Vealey, Vealey. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for showing us operations and engineering types that there is lots of good finance people out there who can look beyond the books and the numbers and who care about the people involved. And yeah, totally agree with you. We need to work on the echo chamber, huh? If things are not what they should be and you start to see symptoms, that's not because necessarily you did something wrong. It's because you might need to be doing something different than you're currently doing. And if you know what the solution is, you probably would have done something about it already. So bring in that fresh perspective, right? Bring in somebody who's willing to constructively look at it with you and have the difficult conversations and get better quicker. So I think we're preaching from the same hymn sheet. Thank you very much, Elisabeth, for joining me today. We'll have you back. And thank you for the audience for tuning in. And I hope to have you back also at the next episode as a listener. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of the Business Emergency Room. If you are currently dealing with chaos or disruption in your business, please reach out. You can email, text, or call, and I will find a way to connect with you within 24 hours. I've helped others steer out of the storm, and I know I can help you too. Talk soon. Please like, subscribe, and share.